I have to admit, last week I did admit that I'm a complainer. It's easy for me to sit around and pick out the negative stuff out of things and complain about that stuff. And Dawn, my wife, you can vouch for that. Yes, she's very, very emphatically there. But I think for many of us, we could say that it's easy for us sometimes to look at the negative in things and in people and complain about them. And so this message will be for me as much as it is for you. And I am trying to remove the log from my own eye to help you remove the speck of dust from yours. So maybe we can all be accountable to each other. If you hear me complain, then let me know. So I think that would work out really well. But a few weeks ago, I asked a question on my Facebook page, and the question was, what are you most often tempted to complain about? What are you most often tempted to complain about? And the results were astounding, of course. But listen to some of these. These are just a few I picked out. What are you tempted to complain about? The weather. Go figure. I think we've had enough, haven't we? People are tempted to complain about people. The snow. Too much to do, not enough time. Being lonely. I like this one. People who complain. People complain about people who complain. All right? Being cold. Selfish people. This one is like me, everything. Everything. I really like this one because this one, again, resonates in my own heart. People who live in Ohio but still can't drive in the snow. That's a big one for me. I hate it. Why? I don't understand. You've lived here all these years. You still can't drive in the snow, right? Co-workers. Oh, yes. This one came from a friend of mine in Florida. He said, pastors who take surveys. So, awesome. Not enough sleep. And again, one that resonates in my heart, the Cleveland Browns. Yes. Another person wrote, depends on what time it is. Okay. I like another friend of mine I grew up with in high school. He wrote this, and I think it has a lot of truth to it. He says, I tend to be a grumbler on most things, and I really have to ask the Lord for me to see the good things instead of the bad. I've learned that 90% of the things I grumble about, I can change. How true is that? We can sit and complain and not do anything about it, but a lot of the times there is something we can do about what we're complaining. So it's kind of interesting. From Facebook to the Bible, you can find many examples of people complaining. Adam, the first man who ever lived, complained about Eve in the garden, right? Remember what he told God? This woman that you put here with me made me do it, right? He's complaining, okay? Job complained to his 3 friends and even to God that he was unhappy about his situation, that Satan had taken all this stuff away from him. And Jesus Jesus put up with the complaints from his 12 disciples, day in and day out. And I think at some point Jesus probably got tired of hearing those complaints. But the Israelites, I think, were the most notorious of complainers in all of the Bible. And that we're going to kind of land on them for just a moment. Having just been led out of slavery in Egypt, the Israelites find themselves surrounded by the Red Sea on one side and the ensuing Egyptian army on the other side. And it looks as though they are trapped. And all the Israelites can do in this situation is complain. In Exodus 14, they said to Moses, I like that. It should be more like they complained. Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in this desert. They've had enough, man. I'm going to complain about this, and maybe Moses and God can do something about this. Well, as you know, God parts the Red Sea, and the Israelites travel through the Red Sea on dry ground to freedom on the other side. He lets the waves of the sea come back and bury the Egyptians, and so Israel's free. Now, once on the other side of this Red Sea in freedom, God then miraculously feeds these guys some 2 million people, feeds them manna from heaven. He gives them water from a rock. He even provides to them quail from heaven. It's as if from heaven. Quail show up because they want meat, because they complained. And on top of all of this, he even protects their clothing from wearing out. All right? So God is really providing for this group of Israelites. And my feeling is, why would you have anything to complain about? God's providing for me. So to thank God for Moses, or to thank God and Moses for all of this, look at what they do in Exodus chapter 16. In the desert, the whole community did what? Grumbled. Yeah, you guys sound like you're grumbling today. In the whole community, the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, if only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted, but you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death. They grumble and complain about what's going on in their lives. This is crazy. God's providing for them, and all they can do is complain. Now, if you want to be divisive, if you want to drive people away, and if you want to drive God crazy and hurt his heart, do what most people do, and that's complain. All you got to do is complain and realize that you can keep on complaining and rationalize it in your mind. Hey, man, everybody else is doing it. Why can't I? I might as well complain about everything else as well, right? So if you want to drive people away, if you want to hurt the heart of God and all that, complain. Makes sense. So we're talking about these little habits, quitting these little habits so that we can make our lives just a little bit better. And we're here today to quit. And specifically today, to quit complaining. So first I want to answer the question, why is complaining so dangerous? Why does God not like to hear our grumblings and complaints about things? What is the cost of complaining? What is the cost of complaining? We'll go back to the Israelites. They're in the middle of this wilderness, this desert, and they're just complaining their hearts out. They just can't seem to grasp contentment. Look at Numbers chapter 11, verse 1. Here it is. Now the people complained about their hardships in the hearing of the Lord. I mean, they're pretty bold. They even want God to hear this. And when God heard them, what happened? Yeah, his anger was aroused. When God heard the Israelites complaining, he gets upset, he gets angry. And then fire from the Lord burned among them and consumed some of the outskirts of camp. That's pretty scary stuff. That's pretty dangerous. You know, God says, I've had enough. No more complaining. And he burns up some of their camp. All right, so here's the deal. Complaining offends the heart of God. What is the cost of complaining? Well, it offends the heart of God. So what? Who cares, right? Those of you who have kids know what it's like. Those of you who have raised kids know what it's like, probably. You have the best intentions from time to time to do something favorable for your children, you know. You might take them out to a restaurant, or you might go and buy a toy for them, or you put a lot of time and effort into planning some kind of thing, party or something for them, and you go through all this trouble, the heartache of spending money and spending time and all this effort and it's stuff you put into this, and what do you get in return? Been there? Oh, I'm bored. You know? Oh, it's not good enough. It's not like my friends, you know. You feel angry because they don't appreciate what you've done for them. All they can do is complain about it. All you want to say to your kid is, you ungrateful little brat, right? Because they don't appreciate what you've done for them. Instead, they find reasons to complain about it. Can you imagine what God feels and thinks every time we complain? I don't know that we think about it, you know. Jesus told us that if we seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, then God would give us everything we need. And if that's true, why would we complain about that? Why would we complain about what God has given us? You know, I think we fail to realize what God has actually given to us. We sit around and complain about how we don't have enough. Or we complain about how the neighbor's stuff is better than ours. Or we complain about another person who gets on our nerves. And we fail to realize that God is the giver of all good things, that God has created all of this. We fail to realize that God has created that person that we're complaining about. We fail to realize that God takes our complaints personally because He has created all this stuff for us. Complaining offends the heart of God. Complaining also carries significant consequences. There are consequences to our complaining. There's something in it that God says, okay, if you're going to complain, well, I'm going to do this. Someone once said that complainers have spiritual bad breath. Complainers have spiritual bad breath. Think about it. Somebody walks up to you and they got bad breath. What do? Kind of step away, or you step to the side so you don't smell the green fog that's there, This is why I chew gum after the worship service, because when you come talk to me, I don't want to offend you, okay? We step away from them. We get away. We don't want to have anything to do with bad breath, so we try to avoid it. Same thing with complainers. When I'm complaining all the time, my wife says, go to the other room. Get out of here, or she leaves, We don't want to be around complainers. Complaining is like having spiritual bad breath. You just want to stay away. But it has some spiritual consequences as well. In Numbers 14, we find that God's finally had enough. And here's what He says in Numbers 14:27. How long would this wicked community grumble against me? I've heard all the complaints of these grumbling Israelites. And then down in verse 29, God says, because of that, in this desert, your bodies will fall. Okay, God's had it up to here. He's done. He doesn't want to hear the complaints anymore. And He's saying, I'm not going to put up with anymore. You've complained too much. I'm not going to bless you with what I wanted to bless you with, and that is to bring you into this land of flowing with milk and honey, a land of prosperity, free from the slavery in Egypt. So because of your complaining, you're all going to die in this desert. Only your children will get to enjoy what I have promised to give you. And so, I'm not saying that God will do that with you, but maybe God wants to bless you with something, really bless you with something and give you something. And all He hears from us is complaining. All He hears from us is, this and that, Well, let me ask this. When your kids complain to you, do you feel like going out and buying them ice cream? Do you feel like going out and, throwing a party for them or anything else? When your kids are complaining to them, what do? You tend to take things away. You tend to kind of withhold some of this stuff because they're complaining about it. They don't appreciate it. Why would you give them something else, right? You think God's going to reward your complaining? I don't think so. I think God might withhold some of His blessings from us because of our complaining. So we need to quit complaining against the one who blesses us. We're driving Him crazy with all our complaining. It's going to cost us significantly. I heard a story about a realtor who was showing a house to a couple of different families. Both were moving in from out of town, so they weren't really familiar with the area. But the realtor took these two families through this house. On the first day, she took one family through, and when the family went through the house, all they could do was complain. They had nothing good to say about this house. They complained about the floor plan, they complained about the color of the carpet, and on and on and on they complained. And so they finally asked the realtor a question. What are the people like in this town? What are the people like here? They want to know, kind of get an idea of what kind of people they're going to be dealing with. And the realtor asks them a question. Well, what are the people like in the town where you're moving from? And of course, this family answers back, well, the people back home, they're kind of bad people. They're a bunch of gossips. They're a bunch of busybodies. And they're not really good people. And so the realtor looked back at them and said, well, chances are you're probably going to find the same type of people here in our community. Well, the next day, the realtor shows this other family this house, and they come through, and they're looking around, and they were very delightful. I mean, they went through the house. They had nothing but good stuff to say. They liked everything about it. They liked the realtor. They just couldn't say enough good things about the house and about the realtor and everything. And so this family also asks the realtor, what are the people like in this town? And of course, the realtor answers back, well, what are the people like in the town you're moving from? Guess what they said? The people back home, they're delightful. They're great people. We had really good friends there. We love to hang out with them. And I can't say enough good about these people back home. And of course, the realtor answers back with, well, chances are you're going to find the same kind of people here. That's good news. You're going to love our people. Now, I don't know if the realtor was just trying to make a sale, okay? But here's the deal. It's about perspective. It's about perspective. If you want to be bitter and critical and negative, you don't have to look hard to find the bitter and critical and negative things in life. If you want to feel good and have a great outlook in life, you don't have to look very hard to find those things. It's about your perspective and how you view life, and that's where complaining comes into play here. If you want to find something to complain about, you can find it very easily. We live in a culture where everything revolves around me, around us, right? We think we're the center of the universe. Everything is mine. I deserve to have everything that everybody else has and more. So we've developed kind of this sense of entitlement. If that person has it, why can't I? Kind of mindset. And if we don't have it, what do? We complain we don't have it, right? And if somebody else has it, we complain about them because they do have it. And then if we get what they have, what do? We complain that it's not the right color, it's not the right size, it's not the right whatever. We find something to complain about it no matter what. We think we have this God-given right to complain about things. To each other, to God, we have this God-given right to complain about things. And so we feel gifted in this area of the complaining department. But here's the question. We're not the center of the story, are we? Who's the center of the story? You can say it out loud. God, Jesus, somebody say government. God is the center of the story. Jesus is the center of the story. And he's the main character. He doesn't exist to serve us. He's not up there with a mighty pointer finger and saying, zap, it's yours. Zap, it's yours. He is the center of the story. He's not on the throne going, oh man, Jeremy's upset again. Oh, we better do something about that. Let's try to find some way to make him happy. He's not up there doing that. He doesn't care that I don't have whatever somebody else has. No, we exist to serve God. When we complain, it's because we think we're the center of the universe. I'm the center of the universe, and that leads to complaining. At its root, there's a profoundly deep and spiritual, serious problem that we've got to deal with when it comes to complaining. So what do we do? What do we do in a culture? Complaining is the norm, and sometimes even expected. We can go to lunch with somebody and, oh man, those Cleveland Browns, they're really terrible this year, and blah, 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 and we complain about them, or we complain about other people that we know in our lives from the church, or we complain about this and that, and so we kind of expect it when we get together. That's what we're going to complain about. So the question is, what do we do? How do we go about restraining our complaining? I like rhyming words. How do we restrain our complaint? We're going to look at the what, and we'll look at the why, and we'll look at the how real quick. And it comes from the passage that Casey read to you earlier today in Philippians chapter 2. The what is a very direct, very complete statement. There's no way you can twist words here. Philippians chapter 2, Paul writes in verse 14, Do everything without what? Look at your neighbor. Look at your spouse, your husband, your wife right now. If you need to come up here and tell me, Dawn, that's fine. But look at them right now. Do everything without complaining or arguing. Go ahead, do that. Tell each other. Do it. Go, go, go. Interaction. Now, here's the thing. I know some of you, you're going to go home, you're going to break out the 3x5 card. You might even have a poster made, I'm going to put this on the refrigerator where my husband can see it every day. Do everything without complaining or argument, right? That's what you're going to do. Some of you are going to do that, and that's okay. I'm all right with that. We need to be reminded that we're not supposed to complain or argue. But I want you to take this a step further, okay? Anytime this week, anytime you find yourself wanting to complain about something, feeling the urge to say something to somebody about something, to complain, here's what I want you to do. Yeah, bite your tongue. And then, after going through a whole week, come to me, show me your tongues. I want to see how bloody and gory they are. But I want you to notice something. I want you to notice how much less you talk. If we take complaining out of our lives, chances are we're probably going to talk a little bit less. That's how much I think some of us complain, including myself. All right? Paul says in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen." As followers of Jesus Christ, this is something we should probably work on. Whatever's coming out of our mouths should be words of encouragement to others, should be building other people up. Complaining, just complaining never made anything better. Might make us feel better because we got it off our chest, but really it doesn't solve anything. So why? Why should we do this? Why should we quit complaining? I quit complaining so that I can become more like Christ. And that's really the goal of our lives. We have set out to be followers of Jesus Christ. As disciples of Jesus Christ, we should be striving to be more like Him. And in verse 14 and 15, Paul writes, "Do everything without complaining or argument, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God, without fault in a crooked and depraved generation, in which you shine like stars in the universe." Paul puts that challenge out there. Quit complaining, quit arguing with each other, because if you do that, you'll become blameless and pure, like Jesus Christ. He could have written, "Do not lie, do not cuss, do not cheat, do not steal, do not look at a woman lustfully, so that you become pure." But he didn't say that. He said, "Do not" what? Complain or argue. It's such a heart issue because at its root, we're trying to be the center of the story. We're trying to write our own story. The first sermon series we had was about our story, my story. And it's not about me writing the story, it's about God writing His story in our lives. And if we can put Him, God, in His rightful place as the author, as the perfecter of the story, then maybe we can stop complaining and become pure. We can become children of God without fault in this very corrupt generation. We can shine like the stars in the universe. I think that is a really cool illustration, to shine like the stars in the universe, because we're becoming more and more like Christ. So far, we've talked about kind of the external consequences and elements of complaining. We've talked about what's on the outside. All of us can train our mouths to speak better words. We know if we start to complain, we can just stop and say, "Okay, Jeremy told me not to complain, bite your tongue," and all that good stuff. But let's look at the internal element in all of this. Jesus said in Luke chapter 6, verse 45, the last section of that, he says, "For out of the overflow of his heart, his mouth speaks." Out of the overflow of his heart, his mouth speaks. And Jesus was talking about evil and corruption and stuff like that. And he was saying, whatever comes out of your mouth reflects how you are on the inside. That's a scary thought. You know, what I speak shows who I am, really am on the inside. And it means complaining is a heart issue. We got some stuff going on inside that we got to fix. If our heart's not right, then we're losing the battle in a significant way. What do we got to do about that? We need to align our hearts with God and his heart. How do we do that? How do we spew forth good things? How do we make our hearts right? Well, number one, remember the what, don't complain. Number two, remember the why so you can become like Christ. And here's how. Choose to rejoice no matter what. Choose to rejoice no matter what. I want you to think about something here in this passage, okay? Here's Paul. Anybody know where Paul is right now as he's writing this letter to the Philippians? Anybody? Yeah, he's in jail. He's in prison. Paul's writing this letter from prison, from captivity, and he had to have been thinking, this is probably the end of my life. I'm coming to the end of my life, and there's not going to be anything left. Jail is it for me, and then I die. And then in verse 17 of Philippians chapter 2, he writes these words to the Philippians, "But even if I am being poured out like a drink offering on the sacrifice and service coming from your faith." Now stop there for a second, because what do you think that means? Even if I'm being poured out like a drink offering, what do you think he's saying? Even if I what? Die. Even if I die. Even if I give my life for the cause of Christ. Now, most people at this point would be complaining. You know, if you're Paul in this situation, you're sitting in jail, even if I'm going to die, we're probably going to complain. We'd probably write a letter to the Philippians a little bit differently, wouldn't we? Get me out of here. The food is terrible. The dungeon is dark. It's damp. It's cold. Get me out of here, please. Not Paul. Isn't that amazing? Not Paul. He says, even if I die, I am glad, and I rejoice with all of you. And then verse 18, so you too should be glad and what? Rejoice with me. What? How in the world can he say that? How can Paul sit there and say from the pit of jail, I am rejoicing because of you? This is the worst situation he could be in his life, almost. If you read Paul and his story, you find more things out about him. But let me remind you, this is the same Paul who said, I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. Who's the center of Paul's story? Is it Paul? Is it? No. Paul made Jesus Christ and God the center of his story. He could have complained, but he didn't. He aligned his heart to the heart of Christ. He had been transformed and forgiven. You can almost hear Paul say, if you only knew where I came from, if you only knew what I'd been forgiven for, if you only knew what Christ has done, how could I ever do anything else but rejoice? Paul trusted God as supreme being, supreme God of the universe, who not only just had Paul's best interests at heart, but his own glory, God's own glory in mind. You can almost hear Paul say, if my discomfort somehow brings him glory, why in the world would I complain about anything? God's the center of the story. I am willing to rejoice and be his humble servant. I choose to rejoice, and so you too should rejoice. And that's from Paul. He knows his life is over, but he finds time to rejoice. There may be all sorts of things in your life that you just want to complain about. You could find anything. You don't have to look very far to find something to complain about. It may be petty things. It may be big things. When you take yourself out of the center of the story and you put the only one who's worthy to be there, God, you will then realize your heart is aligned with God and Christ. You'll suddenly realize that complaining costs a lot. There's a big cost in it. It offends the heart of God. It costs you significantly. It drives people away. God may withhold blessings from you, but you can overcome that. You can quit complaining. How? By becoming more like Christ and aligning your heart with him, rejoicing in all things because he truly is that good.